Ladies and gentlemen, fellow cloud navigators, and anyone who's ever yelled at an EC2 instance, welcome. Today's guest is a real treat. An old friend, a certified AWS whisperer, and one of the few people I know who's actually read the AWS documentation and came back sane. Thank you for joining me, Anthony Fiore.
Hey, Sebastian. Good to be here.
Well, let's kick things off easy before I start throwing the hard balls. What's your role at AWS now? And more importantly, what gets you out of the bed in the morning? Or are you just in it for the swag hoodies like the rest of us?
It's a great question. So my name is Anthony Fiore, also go by Tony. I'm based out of our New York, New Jersey area. And so my role here is I'm a senior storage solutions architect. I focus on global financial customers, so other large banks and just call them wirehouses, I guess, fall under my domain, North America, but I also help out internally and externally across broad customer bases within AWS. Been here for 7 years. So
Wow.
what I love most about my job and what really gets me up in the morning is just I love to solve problems. I'm a lifelong geek. Been around computers since the second grade, which I mean nowadays doesn't really sound like much, but considering the dark ages when I grew up, it was a thing. It's just the constant challenge, being able to help customers through some really challenging problems and some really challenging times. And at the end of the day, it's the people I work with, customers, colleagues, partners like yourself, Sebastian, keep me coming back for more.
I love that. I have a very similar background. It's like back in the Stone Age, when we used to play with sticks and stones. That's what my
Yeah.
kids think, what it used to be like. Now, I know you've worked with a ton of cloud customers. So
Mhm.
what's the common thread? What are the usual headaches when it comes to backup and recovery challenges on
Sure.
AWS? Any pain points that keep rearing their ugly head like a bad Marvel sequel?
Two and a half things. So number one, are they even being backed up, right? Just
Mm,
making sure that their data is safe. And especially at some of our larger customer scale, right? Making sure that the right data is being protected. Ransomware comes up all too often, right?
mm,
Nobody wants to be in the news for those reasons, right? They certainly don't want to risk their customers' trust. There's a lot of risk that comes with ransomware, bad actors. So lots of things like immutability come up, air gap protection come up very often. But at the end of the day, what comes up, whether it's not in the first conversation, but it's going to come up eventually, is cost.
mm.
And if we're not thinking about costs from our initial meeting, trust me, cost is going to rear its ugly head at some point down the road, whether it be a month, a year later. I've got to pay for this. Yes. And there's many different ways to get billed, but there's also many different ways to optimize cost as well. So a lot of my role is really just peeking around corners, right? Providing that subject matter expertise to customers so they don't have to figure out a month, a year down the line, hey, why am I paying for this? So kind of getting all that done initially, getting all that prep work and planning work taken care of. So by the time I've left them, they're in a very mature, good spot,
Mm.
and no surprises.
I've seen similar stuff. It's usually I want everything, the absolute
Yeah,
best backup. And then when you tell them, oh, sure, absolutely, it can be done, and this is the
yeah,
cost, then the CFO starts crying.
yeah. It's not like Oprah Winfrey where you get a car, you get a car, you get a multi-region architecture, you get a multi-region
That's
architecture. But then you
that's
also get a
right,
bill. You're like, maybe I don't want multi-region. So yeah, it gets there, right?
for sure. Yeah. Well, let's shift to the C-suite crowd. So
Sure.
compliance, finance, security, basically the holy trinity of people who don't read technical documentation, but still want a 300-page compliance report. What are some of the new demands you're seeing from upper management that are giving cloud admins a run for their money?
Just being able to prove things, right? So it's one thing from a governance perspective, it's one thing to know you're backing up. You also now need to be able to prove to your compliance departments and your auditors, hey, did I actually back things up?
Mhm.
Are the right things protected? And being able to do that in a historical fashion to say, okay, when did something get onboarded? So compliance, like costs, especially for a lot of the highly regulated industries like financials and healthcare, compliance is always first and foremost to them. And yeah, security too, right? Not just keeping everything in a locked vault somewhere, but who owns the key? Is it ours, right? Can they control that? So being able to have that level of control, security in many different aspects, things that I didn't even think about. As you say, over the years, I get a lot of interesting security questions, and they really help to make our services better. Sometimes when we have to do these feature requests, we get some feedback that, hey, it would be great if we could do X, Y, Z with the service. as you may know, 90% of the AWS roadmap is based on customer feedback.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's great to see, having been here for so long, we focus on what our customers tell us to focus on. That's a really great aspect of this job. And they're constantly pushing us in the right directions.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you guys are doing a great job at this. We even here at N2W, we even have meetings with AWS development where they come to us and say, hey, what do you guys see in the field? What do your customers want? I mean, like EBS, immutable EBS snapshots.
Yep.
Gosh, I knew about this months and months and months and months, actually a year and a half ago, before it even came out, because, well, that was one of the things that we saw as well. And then the developers,
Yep.
the AWS developers actually said, oh, yeah, we're working on this. We're definitely gonna make this happen. So, yes, you're really at the cutting edge. It's very similar. It's very similar to our development as well. I would say, just like you said, 70, 80% of everything in our product is at one point or another just a glimmer in somebody's eye
Yep.
using the product. Okay, now I got to ask a difficult question. Okay, picture
Sure.
this. A company standing at a crossroad. On one side is AWS backup, solid and native.
Mm.
On the other side, a partner solution like N2W with a utility
Mm.
belt of goodies. How do you help users make the right choice? What do you tell companies trying to decide between, hey, keep it simple, or let's get some firepower? Where does N2WS really prove itself?
Awesome. Awesome question. I'm going to use the analogy because I get this a lot when I'm helping out family members decide on a cell phone, right? Because I'll have my aunt call me. She's up in Massachusetts, and she'll say, "Okay, I'm thinking about getting a new iPhone, for example.
Hmm.
Help me choose." Right? It really starts and ends with requirements, right? What does she really need to use the phone for? Is she just going to be making calls? She's going to be taking a lot of pictures and videos. How many is she going to take?
Hmm.
All these sorts of questions. So if it's okay for me to use that analogy, it's very similar. It's almost identical when it comes to helping a customer navigate a journey around what's the right tool for the job, right? Really understanding what their requirements are. What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Oftentimes, when we ask a lot of these probing questions to better understand the requirements of the customer doesn't even know the answer to that. So they've got to go in, they've got to go get that information, create requirements. Like a great example of that would be around recovery time objectives or recovery point objectives, RTOs and RPOs, as we call them. And when I ask a customer, what's your RTO or RPO for this particular application? There are times when the answer is, I don't know. And we have to know because that's really going to drive what the solution is going to look like, right? Perfect
Right.
example of that would be like if you're going to take an EBS snapshot and keep the native snapshot, or if you're going to use like that N2W feature where you can export that snapshot and bring it out to their own managed S3 bucket, right?
Hmm.
Recovery time objective may have an impact on that because writing directly to S3 without a source EBS snapshot, yes, it'll save on costs, but there may be a bit of a hit on the recovery
Hmm.
time, because it's not a native snapshot. And then the question is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is cost optimization enough for you to do that recovery time? And in most cases, the answer is yes, or you just keep some snapshots around. But really, what we try to do is understand the requirements, and then from there, it's really about making sure we understand the tools, right? And that's where having specialists within the AWS organization really helps because I'm blessed to have worked with you guys since even before I worked at AWS, so I have a really good understanding of N2WS and can really help position it. But making sure that I understand the tooling so I can make sure that I'm pitching the right tool for the job as well. For me, it's less about AWS backup versus a partner solution. It's really a question of, because we say we go into Switzerland. You're a partner of ours. You've got just as much right to be at that table as AWS backup does. The real question is, what's the right tool for the job? To me, everything's on a level playing field. It's what's going to be the
Hmm.
right tool. And typically, what I like to do with customers is I don't like to give just one option. Oh yeah, just use this, just use that. Do a bake off. Try it. That's the real value of the cloud in my experience. You don't have to worry about, all right, do I got any physical space in my data center? I got to wait for my electrician to run some L630 whips before I can roll in a rack and do a bake off. It's really easy now to spin up a POC of tool A, tool B, whether that be AWS backup, whether
Right.
that be N2W, do a bake off, see which one works, and make a decision. That should be part of that process and that POC, making sure you have good defined success criteria. So, really long-winded answer, because I mean, there's overlap in some of these tools, but there's also a lot of differences between, and the differences are subtle. right? One of the features I mentioned before, if they're really concerned about costs, right, and they've got a lot of EBS storage to protect, a tool like N2W might be really helpful for them because they can take that data and write that data directly to their own managed S3 bucket. So they can save a lot of money
Right.
compared to your standard EBS snapshot costs that way.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And like you said, we've known each other for a long time. And as you mentioned already, I happen to know you've got a bit of a backup superhero origin story. You
Yeah.
were a proud N2WS customer before joining the AWS mothership.
Hmm?
What was your
Right.
experience like with N2WS back then? And don't worry, this is a safe space. You're allowed to say nice things.
All right. So full disclosure, I was not compensated by N2W to say any of this stuff, but it was really transformative. So, I started using AWS. When I was a customer, I started using AWS before tools like AWS Backup or Data Lifecycle Manager were around, right? So people were doing EBS backups with Lambda functions to schedule
Hmm.
them. There's a whole CloudFormation script that you can run and schedule this based on Lambda functions, which was great. But my environment had EBS, it had RDS, and it had Redshift. So when I had to change the schedule, and I wanted them all to be backed up around the same time. So I got it all done. I got my Lambda functions, I had my RDS schedule, I had my Redshift schedule all set up. But when someone came to me and said, "Yeah, we need to push the schedule back," now I had to go into three different tools, make sure it didn't fat finger anything, and make sure it was all there. Having to go to three different sources of truth to understand what the backup status was like, right? Did the snapshots work? Did they
Hmm.
not? All that stuff. Having three different schedules, it was just a pain. So having a tool, when I was looking around, I said, it's got to be an easier way to do this. Somebody must have come up with a better mousetrap. And then lo and behold, N2W was found. It's like, where was this entire time? So it was really, to me, it was transformative because it really helped simplify a lot. That this was when I was, most of my experience from 97 to, I don't know, 2018, mainly around on-prem. I was a big iron Unix guy, IBM AIX, big IBM storage, IBM backup. I did it all. I was a backup admin, a storage admin, did a lot of those cold site DR tests where you kind of sit around a remote room for a week
Oh,
and restore
yes.
things. Yeah, and then we'd have, obviously, back then we'd have tape failures. I remember having to fix tape leaders. It was bad stuff. So being able to have a tool that felt more like home, right? Like rather than having to schedule all these different things, that felt to me like a regular backup application. This is before the majors really took cloud seriously, in my experience. Cloud was still kind of way far out. Obviously, everyone's doing cloud now, but N2W, in my opinion, you guys were pretty well ahead of the curve. And I remember when I was become a partner, say in 2019, I remember talking to my team lead at the time, and he said, "Yeah, you're going to get N2W," and I was just happy because I'd get to work with you guys professionally and really help build your product and make it even better. And I think we definitely have. So it was really cool to be able to come full circle from that experience of, hey, this is so transformative, using it as a customer to now saying, okay, now we're partnering to make for a better overall customer experience. It was awesome. And now here we are many years later
Yeah.
talking about it. So cool stuff.
It's almost like that stereotype, the people who are now in the cloud, they don't know what they missed back in the day when the cloud started.
Yeah,
I remember some of the first meetings I had is where I needed to explain to people that they need to back up the cloud. And I would get answers like, why? Why would I need to have to back up the cloud? It's always there. Nothing can
yeah.
happen to it. Yes, things have definitely changed.
They have, but they still haven't. I mean, I talk to customers who think that the 11 nines of durability with S3 means it doesn't have to be protected. And it's like, wouldn't that be nice? No, there's that whole shared responsibility model where, yeah, that 11
Hmm.
nines of durability is on our side, but delete is still a delete. Whether it comes from a piece of ransomware, bad actor, or somebody actually deleting an object on S3, delete's still a delete. So those 11 nines of durability, that doesn't mean that we back up objects. It has to be intentionally backed up or
Right.
protected in
Right.
some way.
Well, talking about backups, you've
Yes.
you've written about N2WS recovery scenarios, or as I like to call it, DR drills that don't make you cry. And we've made some major updates to that feature, by the way. Network settings, backup, recovery, cross-region, cross-account, cross-everything flexibility. How do you see recovery scenarios helping organizations with their backup reliability and DR readiness? Any common mistakes they can avoid?
Well, I mean, the first one is just, I know this sounds stupid, but I remember when I first got into like the space on the AWS side, and my manager at the time, really brilliant guy, and Isaiah, if you're listening, thank you for the mentoring. I remember he made a comment to me that customers don't test their backups as often as they should, right? We spend all
Mm-hmm.
this time worrying about the backup. Nobody really thinks about the restore.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in some of these complex environments, right? Even if it's a simple environment. I mean, even if you're talking two EC2 instances in an AWS account, you should test. But
Mm.
to your point, multi-region, multi-account, start getting all these dependencies. One of the really cool things I remember when it first came out, the dry run and recovery scenarios, just being able to orchestrate a DR scenario because if you're running like self-managed database on EC2, which we see customers doing often, right? That's fine. Where does that come in the tier, right? Do you want your SQL Server to come up before your Active Directory instances do, for example,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Probably not. So being able to do that, I think was really cool. Being able to do it in a dry run, I think was really cool because our customers, in my opinion, I mean, our regulated customers, they test because they have to. They've got federal mandates to say you've got to test. But I see a lot of customers, especially some of the smaller guys, they don't put as much time. Everybody's stretched thin, right? So doing a DR drill or a DR
Mm-hmm.
exercise, testing, making sure it works. I always tell customers, when I have those meetings with them, the worst time to see if your backup strategy works is when you actually need to use it, right? You think about people who have had issues with, just making an insurance claim, right? Oh, I would have been nice to know this, right? Would it be great to do a dry run on your insurance policy if your car ever got totaled, right? To see what's really covered and what's not, right? To me, this is a way to do that, to really understand what's covered, what's not. Does
Mm-hmm.
everything come up the way you expect it to? And if not, it's a great way to go into your DR drill plans, or your DR recovery playbook and update it. Do it at least once a year. To me, the more complex an environment, the more often you should test because some of these environments, they could look like the inside of a Rolex watch. There's
Yeah.
just a lot of moving parts, and all you need is one of those little toothed wheels to be a little off, and that
Right.
just throws off the timing of the whole watch. On that note, it has been a while. Tell me about some of these cool enhancements to recovery scenarios that I haven't wrote about since it's been a while since I wrote about it.
So it's like, for example, at a summit, I was talking to somebody
Mm.
in the aisle, and I was like, "Oh yeah, have a great weekend." And he's like, "I'm not going to have a great weekend." Why is that? Because we have a recovery test, a DR drill scheduled for the weekend. So I'm going to be not at home. I'm going to be in the office doing a lot of work. And I was like, "Well, why don't you guys use recovery scenarios? I mean, that would make things so easy, so much easier." And like you just said, well, usually companies have DR drills, I don't know, once, twice a year or so. Why? Well, because the team has to stay up the entire weekend, do testing, make sure that everything spins up in the right order, everything is accessible, everything is actually working, not just up and running, but they can actually talk to each other. The DR drill, and especially the dry run, well, doesn't cost me anything and it's completely automated. And even the transaction testing, we can run scripts so that the communication is actually established between the different components. And because I don't have to do this myself, why don't we run it every week on the weekend?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
easy. And
Absolutely.
network configurations, that's another one. That's a big one because I usually tell people, it's always the same joke that I tell people. I mean, think about it. If we're talking on-prem recovery, and I'd say, I'm going to bring back one of your servers, I'm going to put it on your desk, but I'm not going to give you any routers, no switches, no cables, no connectivity, you'd
Yep.
probably say that's not going to do me any good. Well, it's not
Yep.
any different in the cloud if you don't also have a backup of your network
Yeah.
configuration, VPC settings, subnet settings, routing tables, security groups, VPN connections, VPC peering. Well, then you're really missing a lot. And that's
Absolutely.
that's really a big one.
It's a good point. I see oftentimes customers will think about backup and recovery almost as like it's its own little bubble, but it's like, yeah, you need to worry about DR, but not just the storage component. All right, now you've got the data there, to your point, right? You
Hmm.
just place it on their desk. What now, right? What about the other servers that need to connect to that, right? What about the users that need to
Hmm.
access that, right? Where are they coming in from? Are they still, we're assuming that only the disaster has only taken out the servers. It hasn't, the users are still okay. It's not
Hmm.
always the case, right? I mean, like even back in the old days, but back in the ancient days when we were doing data center disaster recovery, right? It's like, okay, Well, oftentimes you have the data center in the same building as the users. Well, building goes away, building's underwater in a flood. All right, we got a
Mhm.
recovery strategy for the data center. Where's everybody coming in from? Is there a DR office side? Is everybody coming in from home? Are we allow listing the right IPs? How are we authenticating them? It's a whole thing. So that's why testing, I think that's the biggest miss where we just don't see enough of it. But it's great that you guys make it easier, right? It's a nice, easy lift to do testing, to do that the level of orchestration you guys do. It's awesome.
All right. Let's future proof the audience a bit. So, what trends do you see shaping the next, I don't know, 1, 3 years of cloud backup and storage? And what should organizations be doing today so that they don't wake up in 2026 with a big black hole where their backup data used to be? Or worse, even, why is our backup bill bigger than our production bill?
I mean, that's really where a lot of the magic is, I would think. Obviously ransomware is always going to be a constant, right?
Mm,
And we're always going to want to make sure that it's tough. I don't want to use the term step ahead, right? Because it's really tough. All I do is thinking about storage on AWS and backup on AWS. There are people that just think about how to take data with ransomware, right? So it's tough to say you want to stay a step ahead of them, but at least provide a comprehensive enough solution to where there's that castle analogy when it comes to security, right? It's never just one wall of the fortress to keep the invaders out. It's a number of different things, right? So really making sure we're continuing to implement comprehensive zero trust, multi-account, multi-region, all those sorts of approaches when it makes sense for the customer, but keeping our ear to the ground and keeping abreast of those latest updates, but also
mm,
costs, right? Customers' data volumes
yes.
they continue to grow. And one thing I've noticed is that some customers don't need to back up everything either, right? What do you really need to back up? Does it need to be everything? Does it need to be a subset? Having that understanding, I think customers struggle to sometimes, when we look at things like unstructured data, right? S3 buckets, NAS file systems, they end up becoming dumping grounds. And it's tough, pay as you use, right? So all these dumping grounds, I mean, imagine it's like my room when I was in high school, my bedroom in high school. I mean, if it was pay for what I had to store, I'd be owing my mom quite a lot of money for in storage fees. Do I really need it there? So not every customer has a good understanding of everything that's in their S3 buckets or everything that's in their NAS file system. Having that understanding, I think, is key to understanding what you
Hmm.
really need to protect. Because sometimes just defaulting to everything, yeah, you can do it, but there's going to be a cost involved, right? If you're okay with paying
Yes.
that cost and committing to paying that cost for a long period of time, because that's going to continue to grow, that's the thing. So staying in step with ransomware, keeping that castle fortified from both internal and external threats, and then just having that understanding of what's important. I think those are probably some bigger things. We hear a lot about artificial intelligence, Gen AI, machine learning, and whatnot.
Mm,
It's huge for us within Amazon, and we see customers bringing data in order for them to use tools like SageMaker against it and whatnot, which is great. Does it need to be protected? How does it need to be protected? Understanding all that, how to protect this. As data volumes grow, we just need to keep giving them ways to be able to protect that, protect what they need cost effectively, and recover that as they need it.
yeah, for sure.
Is
Or
that a decent answer there, Sebastian?
oh, totally. And gave me PTSD from me in college cleaning up my room. And my
Yeah.
cleanup was usually just put everything into the closet and hope nobody's going to open it.
Yeah, and hope you didn't stack the wrong thing on something else, and then you have a little flaps. That would have never happened in my room. So, uh,
Exactly. I got to tell you, this conversation with you has been fantastic, as always. Thank you for being such an
likewise, man.
amazing guest, for sharing your insights, your stories, and hopefully inspired a few people to rethink your backup strategy before disaster strikes. But before we wrap up, I want to hand you the mic one last time. What's coming up for you? Any project?
I will say this: if I could just make a quick plug, one of the cool things about working in Amazon is that they
Mhm,
give me the ability to run volunteer activities. I've lost count of how many I've run since after
mhm,
COVID because I felt, with the world opening up, we needed to get back together. We need to start helping
mm.
people who needed help, and especially in the New York area, there's a lot of people that need it. And I would just say for anybody listening, I'm sure in your section of the world, there's a need. doesn't really take much to just get up and organize something, give a call to a local organization. I'm sure they could use some help, and I'm sure they'd love to have corporate assistance if you've got a corporate volunteer group. So definitely look in your local area, see if there's organizations that need help, and just give them a call. And it'll probably be one of the most fulfilling times you've had in a long time. So we've got our global month of volunteering that just finished up in May. We
Mhm.
did three events. Two of them were at homeless shelters doing dinner service. Another one was Meals on Wheels, delivering meals to those who people in New York with 5-story walk-ups who that's where they're only people they got to see all day. I don't know how
Mhm.
they do it, So my message is public service announcement from old Tony here. It doesn't take much, just a phone call. You never know who you might benefit. So in the spirit of volunteering, I would just say just go out there and do it and help people.
Absolutely love it. That's a really good message. And I definitely think that everybody should take that to heart.
Hey, you ever come over to this side of the pond, Sebastian? I'd love to have you at one of my events. Because we've been so close, let me give you a little Amazon volunteer shirt too. So
That would be
yeah,
nice. Yes,
that's that'd be a really cool LinkedIn photo op. What do you
for
say?
sure. No doubt. Count me in.
Love it. Sebastian, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for having me. Thanks for you and the team's continued partnership over the
Mhm.
years. It's really been quite a ride, and I look forward to many, many more. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you to say. Well, that's all from us. Remember, backups are like parachutes. If you don't have one when you need it, you probably won't ever need it again. And thanks for watching and listening to us. Bye.